Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S.Piz. Ukraine War breaking news update concerning the peace negotiations, or at least the ceasefire negotiations that are ongoing. Steve Witkoff has been in Moscow today presenting the ceasefire proposal that was discussed between the Americans and Ukrainians the other day in Jeddah. I've taken that to the Russians, to Putin himself, and it has been rejected. So earlier we heard Trump say on the Moscow talks, Envoy Witkoff is having serious conversations in Russia. I've heard things are going well there. Hopefully today we'll have an idea of how things are going for us. And the reason I included that comment is that quote is that he said how it's going for us. The US doesn't see this as a negotiation between Ukraine and Russia. It's a negotiation between the Americans and the Russians still. And it's how can the Americans gain? You know, how's it going for us? Just those little words tell you everything. Okay, so what's happened? Putin has accepted the idea of a ceasefire, right? Which is essentially it's meaningless. So yeah, peace. The idea of peace is of course great. As long as it's on our terms and we get everything that we want out of this, then we're totally happy with it. You know, we of course will agree to a ceasefire if Ukraine completely pull out of Ukraine and give it to the Russians. Then we'll have a ceasefire, no problem at all. Yeah, it's never going to happen. So basically, that's what's going on here. So accepting the idea of a ceasefire is not accepting a ceasefire, says Shashank Joshi from The Economist. As predicted, Russia is delaying. And indeed, this is kind of falls into what Euromaidan Press said, which is you've got three options, or Putin had three options. Well, according to the Telegraph anyway. Accept a ceasefire proposal, but surrender momentum on the battlefield. We can question that. Reject it, but risk antagonizing Donald Trump, or try to drag things out so he can continue fighting as long as possible. He's chosen option 3. So option 3 allows them to keep the momentum on the battlefield, keeps Russia in the conversation so they're not rejecting it outright, and then they don't get punished by the US. Well, that's really what's going on. And it's pretty much what the most probable outcome was always going to be. Russian President Vladimir Putin said Thursday that he agrees in principle with the US proposal for a 30-day ceasefire in Ukraine, but the terms need to be worked out, and he emphasized that it should pave the way to a lasting peace. Quote, so the idea itself is correct and we certainly support it, Putin told a news conference in Moscow, but there are issues we need to discuss, and I think that we need to discuss it with our American colleagues and partners. So we want this to be a discussion between us and the Americans, and indeed he's hinted at a phone call with Trump. That is bad news because Trump will be manipulated by Putin. It's happened before, it will happen again. Him wanting to go to Trump means that Ukraine will be eased out of this discussion, that Europe won't play a part in this discussion, and he will be able to manipulate Trump into demanding his own terms, and then Trump agreeing with it, and then going back to the Ukrainians saying, well, you're the ones not wanting peace, and the Ukrainians going, well, yeah, we do want a ceasefire and we do want peace, but it has to be a just peace, and you're just wanting what Russia wants. You're wanting their maximalist demands. So Putin, quote, today with Lukashenko in press conference, we want guarantees that during the 30-day ceasefire, Ukraine will not conduct mobilization, training, or receive weapons. Well, no, that's absolutely, but of course, Russia can have mobilization, they can train, and they can receive weapons, right? Completely one-sided. He questioned how verification and control would be ensured and pointed out that Russian forces are advancing in most areas, making the ceasefire situation unclear. Ilya Ponomarenko says, you know, the way Putin is now wriggling out of a ceasefire proposal is just a quintessence of how Russia has behaved all of these decades and what kind of peace deals it's willing to make. In particular, he's saying, we are in principle open to a ceasefire, but Ukraine must not receive aid, must not mobilize troops, and must not rearm itself for 30 days, blah, blah, blah. But does Russia, in turn, plan to stop producing weapons, refrain from supplying them to its troops, halt artillery and ammunition purchases from North Korea and Iran, stop manufacturing missiles and drones, and cease buying cannon fodder across Russia and North Korea for insane amounts of money? Well, of course, absolutely effing not. Putin has spent his entire life demanding everything from everyone while offering nothing in return. Go ahead, try negotiating peace with this KGB con artist. And Ukraine Battle Map adds, anyone who thinks Putin won't invade Ukraine again if a ceasefire is done now hasn't been looking at Putin's actions carefully, or not even carefully, just a carefree surveillance of all of the ceasefire arrangements they've had over the last 30 years will tell you they don't do ceasefires, they break them. He's fully intent on continuing war. He's been forgotten by US for everything. Trump plans to take sanctions off and restart relations after a ceasefire. So we look at what's been going on throughout the day. We can see, bullet points of what's happened. Russian President Putin has said that Russia was technically in favour of a proposed ceasefire, but heavily caveated that with nuances and serious issues that need to be resolved before it can be progressed further. So he said that ceasefire should lead to an enduring peace. Well, yeah. And here's the key part, it should remove the root causes of this crisis. We're removing the root causes of this crisis. So demilitarization, denazification, blah, blah, blah. Well, the root cause of this crisis from Putin's point of view is the Zelensky regime, as he would see it, the Ukrainian military. And that's not, you can't demand that will be kind of removed. It's absolutely untenable. He lauded Russian troops for advancing practically all areas of contact line and pointed out that ceasefire must not be used to rearm Ukrainians. Of course it will be, as it will be for the Russians. He further listed a number of practical issues, including resolving of the Ukrainian incursion into Russia's Kursk region. Well, that is actually being sorted out at the moment by his own troops, and on monitoring any violations. And he's saying, and this is, I think, worrying from a Ukrainian point of view, that he suggested he would need to negotiate outstanding issues with our American colleagues and partners, no one else, and maybe a phone call with President Trump. Okay, so that's a problem. What else do we have? If Russia and US agree, Ukraine and Europe will be done for, Lukashenko says, the Belarusian leader says. So, if Russia and US agree, then Europe is irrelevant. It will be done for. The negotiating process between America and Russia holds Europe's fate in their hands, even though it's behaving in a short-sighted manner in the media, at least. And again, they're not going to dupe us. We know our interests. We know our goals. So you've got Lukashenko speaking on behalf of a union. I mean, they have actually signed this Article 5 kind of agreement, Belarus and Russia, but they are acting together as if they are one. Putin and Lukashenko joke about Europe being done for on energy. As well. I want to add, this is Putin, what Mr. Lukashenko said about Europe being done for if Russia and America agree. Yes, indeed, if Russia and America agree to cooperate on energy, and this is a pun because a pipeline in Russian means also being done for. So this will be to Europe's benefit because they will get cheap Russian gas, so they will have a pipeline. They will be done for. What this is appealing to Trump, who's just having a massive trade war today, huge tariffs put on European or EU alcohol in response to whiskey tariffs. So there's a massive trade war going on with Europe, and Russia is saying, hey, look, if we do this deal together over Ukraine's head for Ukraine's fate and future, if we do this deal together, Europe will be done for. Trump will be chomping at the bit to do Europe over. He absolutely hates. The EU is Trump's enemy as it is Putin's enemy. So we are possibly in the middle of seeing Ukraine being used as a political football between, well, not even a political football, a political handshake between the US and Russia. So it's going to be fascinating to see. So the US have a choice. Do they go hard on Russia to get them to the negotiating table properly to adhere to a sensible ceasefire, or do they capitulate to Russia's demands and take that pressure to Ukraine instead and put massive pressures on Ukraine to try and adhere to Russia's demands? And I fear it will be the latter, because that will open up Russia to American interests, and that will allow them to do a deal over the heads of the Ukrainians and the Europeans. And this, there's no inclusion here of the Europeans. There's no Europeans at the table here. So I guess we'll have to wait and see. It could be that the US do the right thing and side with Ukraine in this particular issue, as they should. Yeah. So what else? Yeah, behind Putin's apparently positive rhetoric on a ceasefire, which is not, there is a trap on root causes. Absolutely. That's the trap. The root causes. If you start discussing the root causes with the US, then that means toppling the Zelensky regime, stopping any military assistance to Ukraine, and denuding them of the ability to defend themselves as far as, you know, American assistance to Ukraine goes. And that's going to be intelligence sharing, training, and arming of Ukraine. Uh, that would be the US siding with Russia fully. Now, Putin could put forward maximalist demands in talks with the US. That's what will happen. So they'll get Trump on the blower, talk to Trump, and put forward maximalist demands. Trump is more likely to accede to Russia's maximalist demands than to Ukraine's maximalist demands. It's just simply how the lay of the land at the moment, as we've seen over the last few weeks. So, worrying times, I think, even though some people predicted this would be the case and were thinking this would be good for Ukraine, it depends how the US reacts. And honestly, who knows with Trump? Putin will violate the peace agreement if Ukraine is left without security guarantees, says British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. If you're not going to violate the agreement, then you will not have big problems with guarantees under the agreement. And we know that he has violated the terms of the agreement in the past. Therefore, his reaction reinforces my strong belief that if the deal is not protected by security guarantees, he will breach in due course. So it's super important that if anything, any ceasefire gets done, he's just going to break it. So what are the security guarantees for not breaking it? And that's kind of like any kind of peace deal going forward. Julia Davis from Russian Media Monitor and Daily Beast says perhaps Trump's 2x4 team will finally figure out that the way to force Putin to negotiate is to undermine Russia's ability to wage war instead of undercutting Ukraine's ability to defend itself. Absolutely. So they've got this choice. Do they help Ukraine to really force Russia to the negotiating table, to the ceasefire, by tooling up the US as much as possible, Ukraine as much as possible, while ramping up sanctions on Russia? Or do they go the other way and completely put that pressure on Ukraine instead? Who knows? I'll keep you, as you know, updated when I can. Take care. Let me know what you think below, and I'll speak to you soon.